America is a land of opportunity where history always repeats and sometimes bad history. In August 2022, the Department of Labor began a federal investigation to look into an allegation surrounding Packers Sanitation Services. It turned out to be more than just allegation because they found at least 102 children illegally employed to work overnight shifts in 13 meatpacking plants. At least. These poor children were not fluent in English, mostly interviewed in Spanish to reveal they were there to clean floors, clean razors, sharp tools, grinding machines, and electric knives. Now, I wouldn't trust myself with those kinds of equipment. Their ungodly jobs had them exposed to cleaning agents even. At least 3 of them suffered injuries, including a chemical burn to the face. Can you believe that? It took everything from them so much they were either falling asleep in classes or missing school completely. It's insane. And the thing is, the wheel-tumbling America had completed a turn. Because in 1929 there was a mill strike with spillover effects so pivotal in the history of American labor laws. To understand this months-long uprising, we must first look at Gaston County in 1880, where there were only 5 mills operating in full production. Within 50 years, the number of these mills exploded to 102. To put it simple, Gaston County expanded with a policy in some way, a safety net for workers. Speaking of safety nets, this is my crime fiction. If you're into novels, I'm an author, and for this video, a storyteller. Now, where was I? Yeah, the mills. Whoever worked in those mills lived in houses owned by the mills, so they may say we have a roof over our heads, which is true, but another cold truth is the fact, a simple fact, that these mills owned them so much that entire families, including children, had to work with them. It was a price Americans had to pay after the Civil War and the First World War. Indeed, the United States won both wars, but just because a country is rich does not in any way guarantee that everyone in that country will be rich. The same way goes for winning wars. If a nation wins, the people could still suffer, and that's how it went. After the Civil War, investment came from the North to take advantage of the lower labor cost in the South. Here, freed people had broken their shackles to write their own destiny. It's beautiful on paper, but in reality not so much. Opportunity was not a fair fight for those former sharecroppers and failed farmers. And these investors cared nothing about labor laws as they came in the next decades, especially when the First World War cashed in a lot of money for cotton industry. The government made one purchase order after another to produce uniforms and tents, so now you have a broad idea why cotton was so precious back then. And that's how these cotton mills expanded. Loray Mill had the bragging rights as the largest in the whole United States. But even here, workers earned insufficient wages that children had little choice but to work. In 1904, 70% of spinners, one of the 3 big jobs in the mills, were under 14, mostly girls. One may say 14 is a common working age in those times, but there were children as young as 5 as evidence thanks to incriminating photographs revealing 12-year-olds already with years of experience. Crazy, huh? One of the boys was John Moore, at the time 13 years old, but he had been there for 6 years. He had slaved his way as a sweeper, dofer, and spinner, and he wasn't alone. So at this point, you have a rough idea about the cotton industry. Greed forever tainted these mills as they slowly caved in to the effects of their own folly. When the last guns of the First World War fell silent, their profit began taking a tumble as governments no longer subscribed their service. All the items they had purchased in preparation for more orders had to be shelved, only to rot away in storage. To make things worse, they bought these items on credit, so they gotta find a way to pay with a budget already razor thin, much like their moral standards. To cope with their losses, mill managers began propping up this stretch-out system, a fanciful definition to hide away what is indeed slavery. Workers were forced to double their work with a reduced wage, and this continued into 1929 when a weaver complained a painful reduction in wages. In 1926, that weaver made $19 a week. With the new system, it was 1770, and soon some mill workers were suffering to $5 a week as working conditions hit a new low. Child labor, pathetic pay, demanding work, long hours, dangerous conditions. God knows if there was even medical. These situations pushed workers, including children, to take steps toward unimagined heights. They were so brave that they left a lasting legacy to this day, and it all began on April 1st, 1929, when Fred Irving Beale came hearing about Loray Mill. Beale had been a textile worker, then a union organizer and an activist. He knew damn well what was going on. He knew how hazardous and poorly ventilated those mills were. He knew workers were inhaling dust and lint, hurting their lungs every damn day. Often workers suffered horrible injuries and even death while operating those heavy machines. Danger cornered them in the name of employment. In an environment involving children, accidents were bound to happen. Some of these children were paid as little as 10 cents an hour. They earned every penny, but they had to give it all to their parents to make ends meet. Beale hated every bit of this. Behind him were Nellie Dawson-Kankey, a Scottish-American activist who had been in some of the greatest textile strikes across the 1920s. Not to forget Ella Mae Wiggins, a union organizer who had worked 12 hours for 6 days in a week to be paid $9. All three of these activists, Beale, Kankey, Wiggins, had ties to the Communist Party of the United States. On the day, workers gathered to demand a better pay and conditions, but mill workers preferred not to negotiate. Typical. Soon, the strike turned violent that the National Guard was called in to quell the violence. 71 strikers were arrested, including Beale, who was then convicted for the killing of Sheriff Alderhall. Wiggins was killed during the strike period on September 14. She was pregnant at the time, shot in the chest as she rode in the back of a pickup truck. All headed to the union meeting. Beale survived by skipping the appeal trial to flee to Russia. His communist ideals in the fight against greedy capitalists were soon put to test. Because when Moscow sent him on a propaganda tour to Central Asia, he fell apart, alarmed, sickened, and heartbroken after seeing children in cotton fields. It seemed to him that capitalists and communists were just two sides of the same greedy coin. But between America and the Soviets, there was one fine line. America was always ready for a change. The Loray Mill Strike got national attention, inspiring new laws and regulations, helped improving working conditions, and yes, ending child labors in mills. The strike blew a hole so deep for the sake of the children. Nobody liked the idea of having kids dropping out of school just to work. Because this perpetuated poverty, the strike put education back on the map, leading to programs curated to have kids in schools and avoid exploitation such as this. It seemed America all of a sudden agreed that working for 27 cents is abusive. If we had agreed back then, we should agree once more. End child labor at all costs, be they Americans or immigrants. No one should suffer working for a low pay in a dangerous condition. That's my faith in America. Because America never stayed in the dark like a coward too afraid of a change. Never. If you don't believe me, that's okay. Just look up my other videos and see how America kept changing. If you do believe me, feel free to do the same and be inspired because we have a lot more work to do.